In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, a Pentagon agency opens its doors to UFO reporting. New rules fast-track the release of data collected from the Hubble and James Webb telescopes. Bigfoot makes an appearance in Mississippi, and for our main topic, we go back in time to examine an artifact that is reshaping our understanding of ancient technology. We also take a brief moment to learn the traditional welcome given to cryptids by the Cajun community.
Look, get the bullets. I ain't got no more bullets. Get the bullets, man. Hurry up.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Coe.
In this episode, we are looking at an ancient artifact that was unearthed in central Germany about a little over 20 years ago, known as the Nebra Sky Disc. It has these strange astronomical symbols on them. It's very sordid history, as you'll soon find out. But before we get into that, Jimmy, what have you been up to this week?
I just discovered that there's a thing called nuclear fusion, and they are trying to figure out a way to make that thing work, and they made a big leap forward this past week. And what it means for mankind, if we're able to harness the power of the sun, we would have a clean source of energy in perpetuity, essentially, and it would stop global warming in its tracks. Well, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Nuclear fusion would be a clean energy. It's where you literally fuse atoms together, unlike nuclear fission, which is in our current power plants. That's where we split atoms to create energy, turning matter into energy. Fusion does just the opposite. You fuse two atoms together to form a new atom, and there is some energy released during that process. And that's what creates the energy that we can then harness and use to fuel our civilization.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible listening to all the scientists talk about it. So what they do is they have something that is a fuel pellet. It's about the size of a BB, and it has to be perfect on the outside. They say that it's 100 times smoother than any known mirror on Earth. And even something as small as like a bacteria-sized imperfection has profound effects on the experiment. So they try to get the most perfect pellet that they can. What they're excited about is the pellet they ended up using in this particular experiment wasn't as perfect as it could have been, and it still exceeded net energy. So that was been the holy grail, to get more energy out of the reaction than what they put into it. And that's what they've been trying to do for 60 years now. And it looks like they've done this twice.
Now, it's not that they've created other fusion reactions in the past. They do this by creating this magnetic bubble and also shooting it with lasers in order to heat it up. In the past, they've had to expend more energy than they got out of the reaction, which of course is not what we're going for. This was one of the first time, I thought, but maybe the second time, that the reaction was able to produce more energy than went into the reaction to create the reaction.
They said maybe in another 5 years we'll have a nuclear reaction built.
Well, you know what's funny? When I was in high school, many moons ago, we had a guy from the Navy come in and do a little talk about nuclear energy. And they said in the 1940s, when they first started building nuclear power plants after the war, they said in 20 years, we'll have fusion. And then 20 years passed, and it's the 1960s, and they said in 20 years, we'll have fusion. And even back then, he said, now they say, when will we have fusion? We'll get back to you. It turned out to be much harder than anticipated.
You know, the physics and the physical engineering is just astounding what they've done. It is just an incredible achievement of 60 years worth of human ingenuity going into solving one problem.
Yeah, it will achieve it eventually, and that will be a game changer for the world.
What do you got?
So the Pentagon has received hundreds of new UFO reports I don't know if you heard this. This is on the AP wire.
Oh, yeah. Some of those are from aliens.
Maybe. So there's the new Pentagon office that's set up to track reports of unidentified flying objects, and it has received hundreds of new reports, but no evidence so far of alien life. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, or what are we going to call that? Arrow, I guess?
Yeah, sounds like Arrow.
Was set up in July and was responsible for not only tracking unidentified objects in the sky, but also underwater or in space, or potentially any object that has the ability to move from one domain to the next.
Like balloons.
The office was established following more than a year of attention on unidentified flying objects that military pilots have observed, but have sometimes been reluctant to report due to fear of stigma. In June 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence reported that between 2004 and 2021, there were 144 such encounters, 80 of which were captured on multiple sensors. Since then, we've had lots more reporting, said the anomaly officer Sean Kirkpatrick. When asked to quantify the amount, he said several hundreds. The office was set up not only to examine the question of whether there's extraterrestrial life, but also because of the security risk posed by so many encounters with unknown flying objects by military installations or military aircraft. One reason for the hundreds of additional reports coming in may be the outreach the department has done to destigmatize reporting potential encounters. Each service has also established its own reporting process. Beyond unidentified flying objects, there are a lot of new technologies, such as future stealth bombers and stealth fighters, drones, hypersonic missiles being fielded by both the U.S. and China that could be mistaken for a UFO. Kirkpatrick said the new office has been coordinating with the Pentagon and the U.S. intelligence community to get the signatures of U.S. technology in order to rule out those aircraft or drones. So there you have it. A lot more reporting going on now that we have this Aero department.
Yeah, how would you like to work the lines in that office? You're answering those calls.
It'd be pretty cool.
Actually, shot me in the sky. I see something in the sky. It's bright and it's moving around.
That's Venus, sir.
that's Venus, sir. Well, for my next news article, I have a thing out of Mississippi. It is a Bigfoot sighting, and they're not sure whether it is a hoax or not, but it goes viral. And it is.
You know what? We should really save that for the last story.
Okay.
Let me do my boring story first. Jimmy has a fantastic story, but I have a little boring story I want to tell first.
Okay, let's do that.
I did want to report on this just because a lot of times you'll hear conspiracy theorists and people complain about data from NASA not becoming available to the general public. For instance, the James Webb Space Telescope. Not everything is being released to the general public. Well, this, of course, always makes conspiracy theorists think that somehow the government is finding alien life or they're studying something that they don't want the public to know about. But really, the truth is that if I'm an astronomer and I have an idea and I want to look at a star system, another galaxy or something, I have an idea for a discovery I want to make. I make the observation, I get my telescope time, and then I have 1 year to write my paper and also to take the time and double check my facts. Because otherwise, if all that data is released at the same time, like it's my idea, I'm the astronomer that came up with this idea, but if I don't get my paper done in time, somebody will scoop me. They'll be like, oh, look, there's this thing. And the likelihood of someone else publishing a paper before me goes up. So that's why they generally hold the data for a year. They give that particular scientist time to review the data, time to publish the paper, and maybe make an announcement about a discovery. Well, NASA just made plans to do away with that. And a lot of scientists don't think that's a very good idea. But I guess there's been a lot of complaints that this new powerful telescope is getting data, but it's very few people are getting access to it at this stage. says in August, the White House announced that the results of all federally funded research should be freely accessible by the end of 2025. This will be a big change for scientists in many fields, but ultimately a good move for the democratization of research. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. And of course, in case you don't know, folks, the James Webb Space Telescope is our brand new telescope that just went online back in July. It's many times more powerful than the Hubble Space Telescope. It's been in orbit now for 32 years, I guess, and still producing fantastic images. One thing about the James Webb that a lot of people's not been real excited about, not a lot of real fancy images, but it's an infrared telescope. It's designed to look through gas and dust so to be able to see more. And also whenever galaxies are speeding away as they are, as the universe is expanding, they can shift into the infrared over time. It's already a phenomenon known as redshift, but we'll get into that another time. But what do you think about that? What do you think all that data should be released, or give these scientists the chance to do their research first?
I think I'd have to think about it, because there are probably secondary concerns you have to take into account, probably dealing with funding. So it may be the case that in order to get funding, scientists have to put out a certain number of papers in a certain time frame, and they may have to have they have to meet some kind of minimum criteria. Maybe I don't know enough to make a judgment call, because there may be really good reasons that the system in place requires these scientists to do this research in such a way that if they're scooped, it may ruin their research or hamper their papers in such a way that the funding actually goes down for those scientists who are actually doing the cutting edge work. I don't know. But then, you have a good case for why not share all of this data as fast as possible, because then you have lots of scientists having access to the data, and maybe they make other discoveries that were unintended faster.
And I think that's the idea. That's why they're changing the policy. And I'm not sure how it works with James Webb, but I'm assuming it's similar to Hubble. I watched a documentary a while back about how the directors of that program decide who gets the telescope time, because everybody wants it, right?
Mm-hmm.
An astronomer, people from all over the world want telescope time. They want Hubble to focus on something and get those results. So they have to make a lot of decisions. And I think probably the more prominent scientists in bigger universities get, I would say, favoritism, wouldn't you think? Now, they claim that they try to look at the science and say, this is something that really needs to be explored. They try to make the decisions as the best they can. And in fact, when they interviewed the director at the time of the Hubble Space Telescope, he was saying, I usually spend my day talking to angry astronomers. Some of them even say, do you know who I am? Say that sort of thing as, hey, I'm an important person. But he said, sometimes we have to put the science ahead of, the prestige of the astronomer. I don't know. I think it could also lead to some sloppy science too, and papers being published before their time. I mean, if you have an idea of whatever in astronomy, you're trying to prove something to make a discovery. Now I'm going to be rushed to get that information out to publish that paper. And then somebody still may scoop you, somebody thinking along the same lines as you are.
I want to get that guy's number and call him up and say, do you know who I am? He's going to be like, no, I've never heard of you before, man.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I got a good idea for the Hubble.
All
right. Now,
before we get to that, that really weird thing I found out about the Hubble versus the James Webb is Hubble, when it went up, its mirror is like 7.5 feet across. Is that right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And the size of that mirror was dictated by the size of the cargo bay in the space shuttle.
That's correct.
Now, the James Webb is like 21 feet across. And the reason the way they were able to do that, and matter of fact, the James Webb Telescope is in and of itself a complete marvel. I mean, the things they had to do to get that thing to work. Yeah.
I agree. Where it is at the Lagrange point, I mean, everything about it.
And the temperature that they had to keep it out, I mean, it's got to be super cool. It's amazing. But it's like 21 feet across, and they did it by having these multiple hexagonal disc. So it opens up, and you got, your 21 feet, and you're taking in all of this infrared light.
Mm-hmm. It's a segmented mirror.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, it looks quite different than the Hubble. The Hubble, to me, looks very much like a traditional telescope.
Yeah, Dobsonian telescope.
Has a mirror in the back and the imager in the front. Yeah, and the James Webb looks completely different.
Yeah, I'd like to have the Hubble on the ground here so I could use it in my backyard.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So yeah. So you want to move on to the really cool?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, this is the story of the night.
Now, so for several decades now, people have been claiming to have captured images of this mysterious creature thought to be Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. Out of Mississippi, someone has caught incredible imagery of this creature on their cell phone. It looks initially, as I was watching the video, it looks like it might be a black bear standing up on its hind legs. But as you go through and they get a better angle and cut on it, it definitely has hands and arms, and it's reaching up and messing around with branches. What it's doing with them, it's hard to say.
It's standing upright and looks really straight.
Yeah. The best part about the story, though, is that it is two guys from Mississippi with that beautiful Cajun drawl. And I'd like to play just a few clips to give you a sense of the excitement of the moment and how these two natives of Mississippi address the situation. Let's listen to that now.
Look at the damn bear, man. Look at him. See it, boy? Yeah, I see it. Well, go get the go. Hold up, man. Let me get this stick, man. Oh, goddamn stick, man. Oh, my God. What is that? A male kangaroo. Hold up. I'm going to get it on tape. A bear or something? Look like a damn bear. Hold up. What the fuck is that? What is that? What kind of cards are those cards again? Go get the pistol. Go look under the seat and get the gun. Look up under my seat. Look up under the pickup seat. Get the pistol. Yeah. I don't know what the fuck it is, man. Oh my God. This is real, man. What the fuck? Alright, bring the gun. Man, we're gonna be all over the news, man. Oh, I got all this on film. Ain't nobody gonna believe this. Oh my fucking God. Man, look at this shit. Man, don't be touching me, holding me, cause I'm finna run. Y'all dial 911. Dial 911. Hey, I ain't got no bullets. Go get the bullets, man. Go get the bullets. Look, get the bullets. I ain't got no more bullets. Get the bullets, man. Hurry up. Look up on the seat, man. Get the goddamn bullets, man. Hurry up. I'm gonna shoot this motherfucker.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, that was something.
So I guess it just ends there. And then, I mean, what did happen?
I don't know. That is the thing that has me on the edge of my seat. I just want to know, did they get the bullets? Did they load the pistol or the
Maybe
rifle?
They murdered someone and.
Well, it is Mississippi. There's plenty of bayous. There's places to dump a body. Who knows?
Yeah. There's definitely going to be some follow-up on this, some interviews. There has to be.
Oh, definitely. And we'll keep you updated as we get more information in. And we'll link both on Facebook and on the website to the original source material so you guys can check it out yourselves.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. All right, well, let's move on to tonight's main topic. But before we do, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Look for us on Facebook and Instagram, as well as YouTube. Visit our webpage, CosmicSponge.com. There you can find the web store and links for ways to support the show, such as Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. If you support us on Patreon, you will gain access to another show we do called Weird Wonders, which we produce exclusively for our Patreon supporters. Our contact information is firstcontact@CosmicSponge.com. Well, all right, let's move on to the Nebra Sky Disc. And Jimmy, I'm sure you've done a little legwork on this one. Why don't you get us kicked off tonight?
The metal detector struck gold. The shifty-eyed looters excitedly dug into the rich German soil. Using their spades with the accuracy of a drunk soccer fan, they hit pay dirt with a crunch and a clang. Archaeologists worldwide had a collective Obi-Wan moment as they all winced in unison in response to a great unknown disturbance in the force. The looters' efforts were quickly rewarded with a gold and bronze disc, some bronze swords, axes, a chisel, and some spiral bracelets. While the swords, axes, chisel, and bracelets were incredible enough, it was the disc that was the real prize, and the hunters knew it. The excavated loot was gathered up, tossed in the back of a car, and driven several hours west to be sold for 31,000 German bucks. And so it went for the next 2 years, the disc trading hands on the black market, going up in price along the way, until finally, in February of 2002, a Polish-led strike team concocted a sting with the help of a museum director. The arrest took place in the town of Basel, nestled on the border of Switzerland and France. Meller, the museum director, and the black market dealers retired to a hotel restaurant to discuss business, as one does. When Meller asked for the disc in order to validate its authenticity, he was given a sword instead, which was supposedly from the same treasure trove. He pretended to conduct a test on the blade, easily fooling the two criminals who obviously sat in the back of their respective science classes. Then, in a bold move, he asked if they should set up a second meeting to make the exchange, since the merchants didn't have the disc at the exchange. Little did they know he didn't have the money either. That's when the man across from him lifted up his shirt, revealing the disc, snugly held in place, at the bottom by his pants and at the top by his sweat-covered man chest. Once the disc was revealed, the hotel restaurant erupted with Polish undercover cops shouting for donuts and some to-go boxes while local police executed the arrest. What follows next is an archaeological roller coaster as experts try to make sense of an artifact which defies what we thought we knew of European knowledge going all the way back to 3600 BC. Let's dive in.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy how that whole deal went down. They set up the sting, and I think it went like 2 years went by while this disc was out there.
Yeah, 6 months. Like Meller, the director who was in the sting operation, he was fascinated by it and had been shown a photograph of it by a director at a Berlin museum who was approached by someone trying to sell it.
And yeah, he said he kept it on his radar for a long time until finally he had the opportunity to try and get his hands on it, and I guess it worked. They were trying to sell it for like 700,000 marks. I remember that. So yeah, let's get into this thing. First of all, let's describe what it looks like. So to look at this, it is a green disc that has gold inlays scattered about the disc. Appear to be 32 stars, either a full moon or the sun, and then a crescent moon off to the right. There's one gold strip on the left side of the disc, and then another sort of half circle at the very bottom. Now, in the full circle that's to the left of the crescent moon, a little bit off center, a big chip of the gold inlay wasn't there, but later went back to the site after they interrogated the treasure hunters and everyone involved in this thing. They told them where they dug it up and were able to recover the little gold piece, and then restorers were able to put it back on there. Now, what's amazing about the disc, first of all, nothing like this has ever been found, in particular in Europe. I mean, it looks like some kind of astronomical device or calendar or a representation. Maybe it was just an artwork. The thing is made actually of bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin. And then the gold inlays is actually gold leaf to create the stars and the moon and the other highlights. And immediately, since nothing like this had ever been found before, a lot of experts, many archaeologists just assumed it was a hoax from the very beginning, especially considering its shady origins. But soon restorers got involved and scientists analyzed it. Now, bronze develops a green film on it over time. It's an oxidation process, and it's known as patina. And if you've ever seen just a really old penny that's gotten wet and it turns green, that's exactly the same thing. That's what we're talking about here. That is actually crystals. It's a crystallization caused by it becoming oxidized. The only problem is that counterfeiters can fake this. They can use certain chemicals that can create a fake patina to make it look like the bronze had been aged. This technique had been used before, but under very close scrutiny, under an electron microscope, they can tell if the crystals are smaller and very uniform, they know that it's a fake. Well, this one turned out to look legitimate, and they knew after that test and observation that the disc was very old, but they still had yet to determine its exact age.
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting when they try to determine its exact age, because how do you go about determining the age of a bronze disc?
Right. And there's no way that we know of, really. Typically, you need some type of organic substance to carbon date something, or when artifacts are found at a certain geological layer, let's say in a cave, and there's charcoal there, or let's say Neanderthal men were using, or something like that, right? Something that's organic that can be aged. They can check for carbon-14 because it's a radioactive chemical. They know exactly the rate of decay, and so they know how long something had been there by measuring the decay rate of the carbon-14. So as they were restoring and cleaning these items, again, found alongside the Sky Disc were 2 swords, 2 axe heads, and some bracelets and a chisel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With the swords, of course, the wood had all rotted away over time. When they were disassembling one of the swords, some of a substance came out, and it turned out to be white birchwood bark. In ancient times, this birchwood bark was used as an adhesive. They took this birchwood bark, dated it, and found that it was about 3,600 years old. So that means that the Sky Disc, because it was found with these swords, was fabricated around 1600 BC. Europeans at that time in central Germany were transitioning from a Paleolithic society to the Bronze Era.
And so it's at a minimum that old, but it could be much older.
That's true.
It was just buried at 1600 BC.
It could have been an artifact that was handed down through several generations, but it's at least that old.
Yeah. Now, the curious thing is it was found buried really close to the surface. It was only 10 centimeters down. The disc itself is 30 centimeters in diameter, which is about 12 inches, 1 foot across, just shy of that. It weighs about 4.8 pounds or 2.2 kilograms. Now, the really curious thing is what it's made of. Where did that material come from? Because you can do spectral analysis on it and determine each metal in it. So we've got copper, tin, and gold. Has a certain fingerprint that you can match to where it was sourced from. And this is where things get really crazy, because they started doing a lot of tests on this disc. It was such an extraordinary find, and it might be one of the most tested artifacts in terms of trying to track down the source materials for it of any artifact they've had come out of Europe. And they tested every place they could on mainland Europe and weren't able to find the source for the gold. Now, they found the source for what they thought was the tin and the copper. But then they think that the gold and tin both came from the same place that wasn't anywhere near there.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And just the copper itself, again, like Jimmy said, they use a spectrograph to be able to do a spectral analysis, and comparing the material in the disc to material that have come from different mines around the world. This will tell you where it came from. It turns out that the copper came from a mine in the Alps about 500 kilometers south of central Germany, which was quite a distance. Now it's as the crow flies. So who knows? I mean, that on foot in those days, pretty far away.
And the gold and the tin came from Cornwall in the UK. That is quite a distance as well.
About 1,000 kilometers west of Nebra, but the top of this mountain where it was found, actually just a hill outside of Nebra in Germany, is called Metalberg. And it actually is pretty important.
Yeah, it means middle mountain.
Not mountains as we define them here where I live, but a tall hill. But I mean, that's remarkable to think that this was built during a time whenever there was no written language to any of the European tribes. 3600 BC, Egyptians' civilization was flourishing. The Mesopotamian civilizations were flourishing. The Indus Valley were flourishing and beginning to develop some written language, the Sumerians anyway. I don't know, probably another 1,000 years before they...
Yeah, the next time they see like a similar grouping, like 1,000 years later.
But it just goes to show that ancient man had a trade system set up. And one thing that they had there in Metalberg was potassium chloride, which was a good high quality salt. There were times in the world, in the ancient world, even in ancient Venice, where salt is worth its weight in gold, literally. It's obvious they had something valuable and were able to trade for gold. Now, it's interesting, on the gold, the individual, I didn't write his name down, but he spent about 6 years trying to find where that gold had come from. And he tested about 300 different sites. Back in those days, they mostly panned for gold. They didn't mine it out of shafts. But all of the mines in Europe are almost completely exhausted of any gold. But occasionally a little tiny, teensy tiny flake will appear if you're persistent enough, so that at least you can have a sample from where something was known to have was a source of gold in the ancient world. Well, in Cornwall, it was a very good source of ancient gold. Who knows? They probably specifically reached out for that gold because they knew they could get it there, but their salt was most likely highly sought after in the ancient world as well.
I saw a picture of the salt, and it is a mountain, a literal large hill of salt.
Yeah.
And it's visible now because, they dug into the side of the hill there, but it's immense. It's still there, and there's still an enormous amount of salt coming out of that mountain. The other thing we found out was that the gold, while the primary stage 1 development, because they believe the disc was developed in 4 stages. In stage 1 development, they created the disc. They heated it to 500 degrees so that the bronze would go to black. So originally it was black, like the night. And then the 32 individual little smaller circles, which we believe represent stars, and then the large circle, which represents either the sun or the full moon, and the crescent moon were all sourced from one type of gold. The second stage, they added these 2 arcs on the left and the right, and it came from a different source. They found that gold came from the Carpathian Mountains. And then a different gold was used for another curve that appears at the bottom of the disc, which some believe it might be the Milky Way, represent the Milky Way. Others believe it might represent a sun ship or a solar ship. And then you had a final stage where holes were punched in the outside of the disc, and they believe they may have done that so that they could adhere it to something, and they're not sure what. There's been some speculation that perhaps a shield. Now, when they did those holes around the edge, there's 39 punched holes, all of them 3 millimeters. They ended up moving one of the stars in by a little bit, and then covering up the other 2 stars with the arcs to the left and the right.
Yeah, and of course, at this stage, we have this, right? Scientists have this thing, and they have to decide what was it used for. So after it was restored, went on display, all the measurements were taken and very meticulously studied. Among the 32 stars, the most prominent in the upper right-hand corner of the disk is what can only be the star cluster Pleiades. In Greek mythology, the 7 sisters. This star cluster appears in many ancient cultures, but we know it in the Western world as Pleiades, the 7 nymphs, or the 7 sisters, the 7 nymphs that were pursued by Orion. But there is mythology around this star cluster in practically every culture. I have a list of it. If we have time, I may go through a bunch of those. This star cluster obviously plays a very prominent role in its placement with the moon and also with the other disk, which we believe maybe is the sun, but it could very well be the full moon.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists believe this device, and maybe why the handholds were added later, maybe represented the horizon. They could hold it up to the sky, and it obviously was most likely used, I should say, as some type of calendar or astronomical device to tell what time of the year it was, which we've talked about many times on this show. It was very important for ancient man to know what the seasons were. When is winter coming? When should we harvest? When should we plant? I mean, their lives depended on knowing what day it was. They have no written language. And the one constant in their lives is the stars. The stars change very seldom. I mean, the moon has its 29.5-day cycle. The sun comes up and goes down, and every day and through the seasons moves across the horizon. Being very observant, they were able to track these and over time be able to create a calendar so they knew what time of the year it was. The one thing that was weird, of course, were planets, because they never stayed in the same place. Different significance and different religions were placed upon those heavenly objects because they were always somewhere different at different times of the year. It took quite a lot of observation to really track those. And then, of course, if a comet showed up, their whole world went to shit, right? I mean, you can look at every ancient culture, and when a comet appeared in the sky, not any of cultures considered it a good omen. They were all considered a bad omen.
Yeah, probably because one of them hit the planet and blew us all back to the Stone Age again.
Maybe. But in fact, the word, I was trying to think of where I was going with that.
In fact, the word comet means holy shit.
Oh, in fact, the word disaster is derived from Greek, meaning D is bad, and then aster is star. So bad star.
Oh, wow. Well, learn a little bit of something today.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but that's just how important the night sky was to ancient man. I mean, until we had some type of written language, who knows what kind of religious things were built around observing the sky. It was the one thing that never changed or rarely changed.
Yeah. The incredible thing to me about this disc is the fact that it did address the issue with the intercalary month.
Well, I thought it might be more interesting, or I shouldn't say more interesting, but one thing they did determine before that, which came about later in some later research, was that once they had added the what I call the handles on the right and the left side of the
arcs.
disc,
the
gold arcs, that if you measure directly from one side to the other, it intersects on the round disc at 82 degrees. So in that area in Metalberg, interestingly, there's a site very close to Metalberg, where this was found, called
the Gulsik.
Yeah, Gulsik. And it's a wooden palisade ancient calendar that was dated to about 6,600 years ago. And it's been reconstructed now. And it's a calendar that intersects the same way this disc does at 82 degrees. And it signifies the winter and summer solstice, which, of course, are two very important dates to ancient man. But as other investigators got into some of the other symbolism on here, that's where we started talking about the issues with the lunar calendar as opposed to the solar calendar.
So the sun is 365 days. The lunar cycle falls short by 11 days. So every 3 years, you get like a full month lost.
Right. It's the lunar cycle is 29.5 days. So it falls a little short each year.
So how do you know when you're supposed to plant your crops if you're basing everything off your lunar calendar and you need to wait a month? Well, you just use that disc, look up in the sky, and if you have a crescent moon next to Pleiades, then you need to wait a month before you start for that particular year. And other years, you're not going to have that. Yeah.
Month of winter.
Exactly.
Every 3 years.
Yeah, because you don't want to plant before the last frost, and then you get the frost come in and kill all of your seed. That's not good. Nobody likes you then. You're a priest that's going to get hung out to dry.
Yeah, then you're a bad shaman or whatever.
Yeah, you're going to get replaced pretty quick.
And this idea that's what the symbols on this disc mean. The crescent moon, the full moon or sun, which is probably the sun based on the angles of the 82 degrees, showing the summer and the winter solstice. But most definitely that crescent moon, the thickness of that crescent moon in relation to the star cluster of Pleiades would every 3 years tell you we have one more month of winter. It's kind of like their leap year, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like we add a day every 4 years to our calendar to make up for the fact that it's not exactly 24 hours that the Earth rotates, and that's how we make up for it. But there is some confirmation that that is exactly the reason that these symbols are on this disc, because in some cuneiform tablets dated to about 600 BC, which is believed to be at least 1,000 years after this disc was made, they found in some Babylonian writings and cuneiform tablets the same pattern of using every third year, adding a month to the calendar so that it would match back up to the lunar cycles.
Mind blowing.
We've already established, because these materials came from all over the known world at the time. I mean, as far away as England, there's no doubt there was plenty of trade, and not only trading goods, but trading knowledge. So somebody came up with this idea of how to track that. And, every third year we have to add a month to winter. Imperfect system, but that's the best they had at the time, I suppose.
Now, I did a little bit of research on the other stars on the disk, and I've seen it appears that most archaeologists are saying that those were just decorative and didn't represent anything, but there are some who have labeled each one of those patterns of stars. Some of them say that the ones that are in between what might be the sun or the full moon and the crescent moon represent Venus, Mercury, and Mars. And then that also on there is Ursa Major, Lupus, Capricorn, Merrick. There's a lot of discussion, and I don't know that anyone has settled on exactly what those other stars represent, whether they're just decorative or whether they actually represent stars that were in the night sky 3,000 years ago.
Probably. I don't know. I didn't go that far into it. I know the other symbol on the bottom you had mentioned, maybe sunboat, and something else. Also, it could represent a rainbow, some people have said.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. They're not sure on that one either. But pretty sure about the relationship between Pleiades, the star cluster, and the thickness of that crescent moon would only appear that way every third year. So that was how they would coincide and know that they needed to add a month to their calendar. The neat thing about this, it was a mobile calendar. Think about Stonehenge. Think about this other site, Gossik, in Germany. Those were static sites. You had to go there. No doubt there were religious significance and festivals, or who knows what, some type of religious rituals around the days they went to consult the calendar. But this one, it's a mobile, right? You can take it on vacation with you if you need to know when to add a month to winter, right?
Exactly. I mean, or if you had to run away from invading armies, you could take your little calendar with you.
Take your star calendar with you. Exactly. Now, Jimmy, I was thinking you had told me before we got into this earlier today that there was a new article you read about perhaps the dating was not 1,600 years BC, but perhaps some new research had pointed to something else.
So a new paper came out, and let me see if I can find. Back in 2020, the Nebra Sky Disc was evaluated once more, and this time a new paper that came out by Rupert Gebhardt, who was the director of the Munich Archaeology Stammsammlung, and Rügerd Kraus, professor of prehistory and early European history at the University of Frankfurt, detail how they researched the discovery of the Nebra Sky Disc. It was supposedly found in 1999 by Henry Westphal and Mario Renner, while they were treasure hunting with a metal detector without a license. In that process, they allegedly damaged it with a spade, and panicking that they'd be discovered, they sold their cash for, that 31,000 Deutschmarks to a dealer. What they contend is that the disc wasn't found next to those other bronze items that were located, and that the disc itself looks more like it came out of the Iron Age and not the Bronze Age. They claim that soil on the other items didn't match the soil on the disc. And this is where archaeologists start going to their separate corners and putting on their boxing gloves, because there's a lot of fighting going on over this. as to what, which camp is correct about, the actual origin of this disc.
Major problem with the guys that are trying to say that the age is different. The little gold flake that had been missing for 2 years
was in the excavation site.
They went back to the very spot that the treasure hunters said they excavated the swords, the axes, the bracelets, and the sky disc, and they found that gold flake. Archaeologists found the gold flake and repaired the disc with it.
Yeah, and I did not read the full paper as to whether they accounted for that or not, and whether they accounted for the dirt they did find that did match both the site and the items found in the at the site. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, and it could have been contaminated by things they dug up other places too.
Correct.
I mean, I think the idea is, and I could see the logic there. Okay, I found these swords, these axe heads, though valuable, pale in comparison to the value of the sky disc. When I'm being interrogated by the police, maybe I'll say, I dug it all up there, but I want to keep my place that I found the sky disc secret. I could see a motivation for that, but, they interviewed more than one person, and to keep a conspiracy like that under wraps is probably unlikely. I would say it came from that site. Just again, they went back to the site and they found the missing piece.
Yeah, and it's in a very unusual place. That's not a place you would expect to find a burial of that type. Though 20 miles to the southwest, there's the burial of the Prince of Helmsdorf, and very similarly, he has 2 bronze swords, 2 bronze axes, and a set of bronze bracelets buried with him. So it's not that's very common for that region. So we're thumbs up there. In terms of the sky disc itself, having the technology built into a small disc is unusual, but Gulsik Circle, which is 19 miles to the southeast of Nebra, has that whole technology built into this large structure. So they had the knowledge at the time, and the farmland there is really, really good. It's not great for livestock, but it's fantastic for crops. And then they have the sodium mountain. So, I mean.
Yeah, there's the value. I mean, they probably traded food as well, but still, the salt in the ancient world was a rare commodity.
Yeah.
And they had a ton of it. Tons of it, literally tons of it.
In a location that was perfect for farming, so they could build up a really stable community and then use the sodium for trade. It all sort of holds together pretty well in my book for, all my vast experience in studying ancient man.
And I want to wrap up a little bit talking about Palladius and how it plays into in some of the ancient cultures. And like I said, every ancient culture, that was a significant star formation. Some of my favorite, it appears in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible. It appears in the Quran.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's in Job and Amos. Yeah. I grew up in the South where we had a lot of Bible studies.
That's right. It's in Turkey, Iran. Greek mythology, of course, is the 7 sisters who were spied by the hunter Orion, who begins to pursue them. They're nymphs, I think. And he pursues them on the earth for like 2 years. And finally, they call out to Zeus, who turns them into doves, and they fly up into the stars, and they become the 7 sisters forever in the stars. But then he sends a scorpion or actually Artemis sends the scorpion to kill Orion, which it does. And then Zeus feels sorry for him, puts him in the sky as well. So he's always pursuing the 7 sisters in the sky. They rise first, and then Orion comes up. And then after that, the scorpion, Scorpio, is chasing Orion through the sky. And some of the indigenous people of the Americas, the Blackfoot, think they're 7 lost boys. The Lakota tribe. So the Lakota had a legend that the 7 sisters were 7 women. I'm not sure if they were sisters, but they went to dance, and they were all dancing around, and some grizzly bears found them. And so they all ran and jumped onto this big rock, and they called out for their deity to save them. And they were actually on top of Devil's Tower. and Devil's Tower grew out of the ground straight up. And the long marks down the side of Devil's Tower are the claw marks of the bears as it was trying to reach the 7 women.
Oh.
And then later they became the stars. That's their legend. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is a pretty cool one.
And listeners, if you want to see the 7 sisters Pleiades, it's one of my favorite things to look at in the night sky. It is in the constellation of Taurus. It appears very prominently in the winter sky in the northern hemisphere, which is, as we record this right now, you can look at Orion as Orion rises, or you can see it in Taurus to the right, far right of Taurus. But also the way I like to find it is find Orion's belt. And if you follow it up, sort of at an angle, you will find it. It's just a little cluster of really blue stars. Now, oddly enough, when you look at Pleiades with the naked eye, scientists today say you can only see 5 with the naked eye, but traditions have always imagined it as a group of 7. That's not only the Greeks, where we get the modern interpretation of it today of Pleiades being pursued by Orion the hunter, but in all of the other cultures as well, it always appears as 7. So you have to ask yourself, was it 3,000 years ago? Did they appear as 7 stars? Now we can only see 5.
I went looking to see how many of those stars can you actually see with the naked eye. And naked eye observers usually spot 6 stars at a glimpse. However, the longer you look, the more stars you see. Given acute vision and clear skies without light pollution, an American astronomer, Robert Burnham Jr., claimed to see 20.
There's a few people that have much better than 20/20 vision that can see a lot more. There was a famous, what'd you say the name of that astronomer
His name was Robert Burnham Jr. He claimed to see 20, and then most people see no more than 14. Binoculars can give you a better field of view, but I mean, there's way more than 7 stars up there. Those are just the brightest ones. How many are there? There's 1,000 members in that star cluster.
The main stars that you see, which I've looked at them through my telescope, they're really hot B-type blue stars. They were created around the same time, most likely, is the way most people believe. If you look at the Orion Nebula now, it's a big nebula, so it's sort of a star factory. It's a cloud of gas. See, I forget how long ago they believe they probably formed, but they all formed about 100 million years ago, I believe. And there are these hot blue luminous stars, and there's some beautiful photos. They all glow blue, and that's one of my goals in my new hobby of astronomy and astrophotography to try and get a photograph like this sometime. There was something pretty interesting, a nice little trivial thing here. That same star cluster in Japan is called Subaru.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And if you look at the emblem, the Subaru emblem on the car company, it has 6 stars. And what it represents to them, Subaru means in Japanese coming together, or in more modern times, maybe teamwork.
United, yeah.
Yeah, being united. And there was 5 car companies that came together to create Subaru, the Subaru car company. And that's why it represents that. But also Mauna Kea, in an observatory in Hawaii, the Japanese have a telescope there that's called Subaru as well.
Oh, that I didn't know. That's cool.
So anyway, that is all I have on the Nebra Sky Disc. It's a fascinating artifact. Listeners, get on there and take a look at it. I'm sure when Jimmy posts this on Facebook and the other listening platforms, that we'll have the places we can, we'll put a picture of the Sky Disc up. So, you can take a look at it and just, or maybe, just take a moment and look at it on your phone. Just, it's Nebra, like saying Nebraska, just Nebra. And it was named because of the village of Nebra in Germany, which was near where this artifact was found. Guess we should have mentioned that in the beginning of it.
That's all right. Maybe I'll move that part to the beginning.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jimmy, do you have anything you need to add on tonight's episode?
No, I think we covered this one pretty good. Yeah, I do want to say one thing. So this is probably going to be the last episode for the year. We're going to have Christmas, and then we're going to spend a little bit of a break here, studying up for a really special 2-part episode, I think, that'll come out in January. Should be a lot of fun.
I already forgot what we were going to do. It was my idea.
Yeah, it's going to be the issues with space travel. We might not phrase it quite that way, but yeah.
Yeah, we're not quite sure what the official title will be, but when we discuss UFOs, flying saucers, or aliens visiting us, it shouldn't be underestimated how difficult travel between the stars could be and how vast our universe is. So we thought we would try to do an episode discussing a little bit about some issues if you do want to visit another star system, or if aliens are coming here, what they would have to overcome in order to do that.
Yeah, sort of bring those astronomical, super large problems down to Earth, so to speak.
There you go. Well, all right. Before we get out of here, I'd like to remind everyone, please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Look for us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Check out our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. Our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Jimmy, did I leave anything out?
No, you didn't.
All right. Well, with all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. I'll see you next week. Hey, man, you ready for Christmas?
I am. How about you?
Yeah, well, we're going to be celebrating Christmas when this thing drops. So I'll be at home, feet kicked up in front of the fire,
Some eggnog.
Yeah, some
eggnog coursing through your veins.
Whiskey-laden eggnog. What do you put in eggnog? I know there's some kind of alcohol in it. And then
I don't drink
a
it.
big cigar. I don't drink it either. A big old cigar. I don't even smoke. And
You don't smoke.
Yeah. I'm just painting a scene for me. I'm probably just going to be in some fluffy slippers, sitting back, drinking a coffee.
Yeah, there you go.
That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account, firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week. Hey, man, I'm really surprised after going through all that constellation stuff and space stuff with the Nebra Sky Disc that we didn't have any cross-references with aliens or UFOs or stuff like that.
Well, hold on.
No way.
Yeah, in the UFO culture, there are a race of ET beings known as Pleiadians. They are the tall, Nordic-looking guys.
Oh, the master race
Right.
of aliens.
I don't know if they're I don't know. They're Nordic guys.
Right.
That's all I know. I think they use a Nordic track. But Barbara Markinak, I think we've talked about her before. She channels these aliens, the Pleiadians. So she's like giving these messages to the human race, from the Pleiadians, or Pleiadians, for humanity. And so it turns out that the sun and the earth at some future time will pass through a photon belt from Pleiades, causing a cataclysm, or it may initiate a spiritual transition referred to as a shift in consciousness, or the great shift, or sometimes as the shift of the ages. So you want to watch out for that.
I'll gonna dig my tachyon detector out of my closet just in case.
There you go. Why not? It never worked out for the guys on Star Trek. It's like, don't use the tachyon deflector thing, man. Every time they did that,
but we got a couple extra episodes out of the season every time they did that. The writers got lazy.
I'm just curious to see a photon belt. Wouldn't that just be a beam of light?
A light belt. Ooh, it's bright.
Okay.
I'm feeling consciously aware.
Oh, wait, I think I'm in a photon belt right now.